Welcome back to the Outpost. I'm Nomad. And today we're going to be going over quality over quantity once again, but this time we're going to be talking about the more practical applications that would come from quality over quantity when it comes to doing work in or around or on the outpost. So today we're going to touch on hand tools, which can range from anything that you'd use as far as chisels, hammers, screwdrivers, any tool that requires your hands to use and nothing else. So when it comes to quality over quantity, when it comes to hand tools, I would highly suggest that you seek out the more quality tools, because these are the tools that are going to be applying the most leverage, the most rigorous activities as far as when you're using them, because you're going to be doing a lot of hammering and chiseling. You're going to be doing a lot of torquing and twisting. And what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on the tools when you have to use your hands and your muscles to actually make the tools function. So I would definitely tend to stick towards the more quality hand tools if you can. There are tools like cheap chisels, for example, can work just as good, but do they work as good as like a very expensive Japanese steel chisel? No. But you can cut corners on some things. Some hand tools you can cut corners on. Wrenches and wire cutters don't really need to be like state of the art or top of the line. So there are like a lot of hand tools out there, and there's a lot of different like versions of wrenches, right? Like there's a lot of pipe wrenches out there and stuff like that. There's all kinds of varying versions of like these two tools right here. They kind of branch out into multiple different trades, and you can get away with just as good for a lot of these tools. Something like a hammer, it doesn't need to be a stiletto or Martinez. It doesn't need to be like some crazy fancy titanium whatever, right? As long as it can withstand use and abuse. I would definitely recommend a more flat claw. The more curved claws are typically more homeowner grade, and you don't typically see these on professional grade things. But any tool that you're gonna be like really using, you're gonna want to make sure that it is built to last. Okay, something as simple as like these Japanese style hand saws, right? You can get the just as good version. Will it do the job that this will? Yes. Yes, it will. But this one does it at like a far superior level, both in cleanliness of cut, as well as ease of cutting. So these are all things that you're going to have to weigh into your decisions when you're dealing with tool purchasing when it comes to hand tools. And then lastly, pouches, because you need something to put all these tools into and work with. This is definitely, I would say, somewhere in the realm, if we're talking tactical, like your chest rig, even your battle belt, what have you, right? This was my everyday carry for 20 plus years. Okay. So you want to make sure that you get something that is going to last. I get Occidental leather. They're probably one of the more expensive pouch brands on the market, but you know, they lifetime warranty everything, made in USA, and I can't really speak any more highly of them. As far as a brand is concerned, if anything breaks, you just mail it out to them. They take care of it, send it back. Okay, so that's like hand tools. And I think I covered them first because I feel hand tools are going to be the most important tools going into this coming struggle that we're all going to be a part of here shortly. Next on the list, as far as importance, I feel around the Outpost is going to be cordless tools. So the top 3 brands when it comes to cordless tools that I would go to and that I would recommend is DeWalt, Makita, or Milwaukee. Makita is probably your equivalent to Palmetto State Armory. It's the old reliable. It's cheap. Batteries are usually the cheapest out of all of the batteries outside of Ryobi. I believe as far as like cordless tools are concerned, if you are buying into cordless tools, I would suggest, like for the first time, I would suggest Makita 100%. They've never stood me wrong. I've used them through the second half of my career, simply because DeWalt in Milwaukee have a tendency to get stolen a lot. I guess that's it. You know, you get people that come in on job sites, they see DeWalt and Milwaukee tools, and they just they lose their sanity, and they have to steal them. So that's another reason why I professionally have tended to stay away from Milwaukee and DeWalt, because they grow legs and they walk away. I would also suggest a Rigid actually as well, as that's the company that was going to be number 4 when I couldn't remember it before. But Rigid, I do know of several people that have spoken very highly of their Rigid cordless tools, and they're very devoted to them. And yeah, so at the end of the day, just make sure that you're getting something that is professional grade. If it can withstand professional grade use, then it will give you the most longevity when it comes to surviving the shit hits the fan situation when it comes. So power tools. Power tools like this planer here, or that chop saw there, right? I'm through and through DeWalt fanboy. You'll never get me away from it. That's all I got to say about that, DeWalt. Oh, cordless tools. So Milwaukee and DeWalt, they are great. They are great tools. They're pretty much all the same thing. At a professional level, cordless tools are all pretty much the same thing. They're all stock cars, and they just all have different logos on the outside, different colors for their teams, and an entire cult-like fan base in the construction industry that will swear up and down that their fucking Makita 20 volt will drive a fucking 8-inch lag into a solid beam faster than a DeWalt and a Milwaukee. I mean, whatever, dude. Like, as long as it's professional grade, it's going to hold up. Bits and blades. Bits, 100% Milwaukee. They're cheap. They give you everything you need in the modern construction industry as far as hex bits are concerned. They give you minimal things like flatheads and Phillips. And when it comes to blades, Freud. When it comes, they just, for everything. Shop tools are going to be something that you're going to have to invest in as you expand and grow your Outpost. But you're talking anything that can range from mechanical tools like ratchet sets and air guns to take tires off and things like that, all the way down to floor jacks and other things that, is going to help you service larger equipment. as far as shop tools are concerned, I would say buy what you can afford. I would say at that point, something is better than nothing when we get out to the shop equipment. But like I said, it's going to be like a overtime investment. You're going to have to start with the cheaper stuff to be able to maintain smaller projects around the Outpost. You're going to need like a cheap ratchet set or something to be able to take bolts and nuts and things like that apart. Does it need to be the best, highest quality? No. Will higher quality stuff do a better job, last longer? Yes. Then now we have specialized tools. Specialized tools are things like welders or like more single purpose, like driven tools. Like a Dremel kit can be used for a lot of things, but it's a specialized tool. When it comes to specialized tools, there's brands like Hilti, for example. Hilti are probably the leading tool company, at least in the early days, right? Right? So this is a hammer drill. This thing literally, it's an all intended purpose is to drill stone, concrete, extremely hard surfaces and things like that, right? To score a hole, to be able to anchor into these hard surfaces. Okay, so that's all that really does. That's a specialized tool. Okay. When it comes to specialized tools, you don't use them as much, but it doesn't mean you just buy the cheapest piece of shit you can find just because you're only going to use it once in a blue moon. Especially if it comes to doing things like drilling into extremely hard surfaces like concrete and stone. Because at the end of the day, the bit matters more than the drill, but the drill, if it doesn't have the power, you'll burn that motor out just trying to make the hole. And then you got nothing. Then you're back to the fucking Stone Age again. Okay. When it comes to compressors can be hit or miss on the cheap versus the quality. Is having a huge compressor that's got a massive gallon reserve tank needed? No. But if you have a small little pancake compressor that is constantly running, like you shoot like the nail gun 8 times and it kicks on, you're going to need to have the power to be able to run that little thing. You know what I'm saying? So having like a big, huge, massive tank compressor would be nice in a apocalypse scenario because you could just fire up the generator, fill the compressor up, run it till it won't shoot nails anymore or whatever you're doing, whether it's using air tools like ratchets or lug wrenches or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And then once the tank is too low to run your tools, you can just fire up the generator, fill the freaking compressor back up, and then you don't have to like leave the generator running full time to run the compressor like you would is if it was a small little pancake compressor. But if you're using a nail gun, like if you're framing something in this apocalypse scenario, you're gonna need to have the generator running full time anyways, because that framing gun's gonna be drawing so much air that it's just your compressor is going to be constantly running anyhow, regardless of probably how big your tank is. That turning your compressor or your generator on and off so many times will probably end up wasting more fuel than it would if you just left it on during the duration of using the compressor. So that said, compressors, the branding is not really a huge issue. Porta-cable has always been a very solid, just like they go and they go and they go, and they never really kind of give up. You almost have to throw them off a roof, literally, to do them in. But yeah, just go with your budget on this one. If you can only afford a small, tiny pancake compressor, then so be it. If you can afford a huge tank compressor and you have the space to keep it, don't see why not either. Hydraulics. Okay, so hydraulics is kind of, we're just gonna brush up that it exists, and you're gonna, unless you have tools like tractors, backhoes, skid steers, things like that, you're gonna need to have the infrastructure to be able to support them, right? You can't just own a tractor and I mean, I guess you could just own a tractor and have like a mechanic show up or whatever and do all the work for you. But typically, people that own heavy equipment have ways to work on that heavy equipment to avoid a lot of the overhead costs that come with owning heavy equipment. Then we have like gas powered and diesel powered tools and apparatuses and things that we're going to be, using as far as, to help sustain society and things like that on the outpost, right? And that can be anywhere from chainsaws down to like even skidders, right? Dragging trees out of the woods and stuff like that. Like if we plan to keep life going, we're gonna need to be able to keep a lot of the services in life that we take for granted afloat and still working. And then workwear. You can turn any piece of clothing into workwear. It's that simple, right? Is Carhartt, Dickies, are clothes made for working better? Sure. Some people prefer, like for me, I'm a Wrangler guy. I like those flex fit Wranglers. You know what I mean? I enjoy wearing a hoodie until it's too warm to wear one. It's whatever. Just be sure that if you wear clothes to work in, they will become work clothes and you will ruin them eventually. Hardware. This is kind of I feel like hardware is kind of like do quality, quantity. Hardware, I would definitely lean towards the quality. All right. You're going to want like GRK screws that run the hex tip. Okay. You're not going to want Phillips screws. You're not going to want flathead screws. If that's all you got, then whatever. But like, no judgments. But if you got 1,000 Phillips head screws and you got 1,000 hex bit screws, I'm going to be able to use the hex bit screws probably 5 times as many times as you're going to be able to use that single Phillips bit screw. And that's because a lot of hardware technology has changed in the last 20 years, and Phillips and flatheads are gone the way of the dodo and are mainly used for, IKEA furniture. Is hardware something you could get away with and cheap out on? Yes, of course. Would I? I don't, there's hardware that I do cheap out on because there's no other choice really. And then there's hardware that I do pay an extra premium like the GRKs to make sure that I will be able to reuse that hardware as many times as I possibly can. Fittings, I feel as though it's like something that you can definitely get away with cheaping out on. Fittings are what you attach to your compressed air tools. Just make sure you keep these all unified. So all your male and female fittings are the same for all your tools that take compressed air. Now, materials is where I think I'm probably going to cause a lot of the most controversy with this whole situation, is because I feel materials can definitely be cheaped out on, because you could take cheap materials and make things look amazing. So you could save a lot of money by utilizing material costs to your advantage. You can really stretch your dollar when you do work yourself by getting things like cheaper materials. Like, for instance, on my farm stand, the security doors to lock it up at the end of the night is just 2x4s and pieces of strapping with some cheapo cedar shakes, and these are just like the cheap, like $20 a bundle cedar shakes that you get from Home Depot. But with a little extra work, you can take cheap materials and turn them into something that is amazing and high quality. So definitely make up as much ground financially as you can in the material department, and use the money you save from the materials to invest in the tools that you need to do the work on your outpost. Cords. Just make sure they got a ground. Make sure they're insulated. Really nothing fancy about them. When it comes to compressor hoses, you're going to want to make sure you get all-season hoses that are meant for being outside all year long, especially during the winter, because compressors generate a lot of water, and that water can get into the hoses and freeze. So you want to make sure that you get hoses that are rated for all season if you live in a climate that experiences cold winters. Sawhorses, if you need to be mobile, they make horses that pack up in on themselves, very small footprint, and they're good to go wherever you are. The downsides when it comes to sawhorses that are like that is they're usually very unsturdy and can be a pain in the ass to work on. But then, on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have handmade sawhorses, and they can be extremely cumbersome, heavy, and take up a much larger footprint, like say in the back of a truck or a trailer, and can, be a bit more of a pain to move from point A to point B. Now, with that said, I believe I've covered most of the general practical tools that you could use over a shit hits the fan situation in or around your outpost. Let's not forget, there's medical tools, there's dental tools, veterinarian tools to keep and care for animals specific to that alone. You also have appliances, right? Do you have a wood stove? Are you going to be able to cook and clean and prepare food with the current situation that you have in your house? If power was gone, if you no longer had propane, if you no longer had natural gas being fed to your house from whatever source it's coming from. These are the things that we need to get ourselves ready for. With that said, hopefully you guys made it all the way to the end. And if you did, please hit that like and subscribe. And let me know if I missed anything or if there's something you'd like to add down in the comments below. And we'll see you next time here on the Outpost. I'm Nomad.